Okay. And we're back. You just didn't expect us that soon. And I just want you to know, thank you for listening. We are really having some very interesting opportunities tonight and all day, actually. So we have retired Sergeant of the Army for Intelligence, Sergeant William Cotel is back with us again. Welcome, William.
Thank you.
And we have come together tonight to share a special message that has particular timing, and I did post it in the YouTube notes there, so you all can see that, and you can refer to that as we go along. But we've been having some technical difficulties along the way, and now we are just opting for direct route. Hold the phone. We got this, okay? So, everyone, please welcome Sergeant Cotel back. And this evening, we're going to be sharing some more information that he has regarding what's happening in the world that maybe has some significance to both the past and to now. So, William, you sent out a letter to all networks, including me, and I posted that letter on YouTube in the posting community page so you all can go there and reference that and see that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it is that you wrote there and what it is that you are pointing out to people at this very important juncture, because a lot's happened in the last week.
There is, and I'll tell you, just so your viewers know this, or your listeners, that one of the quickest ways the government can inject and censor people is by censoring their ability to access communications. Communications come in all forms, everything from emails to Zoom to YouTube to Restream, live stream, whatever that thing is, and many, many more platforms. And by censoring you, they can just shut it off or interrupt sensitive times, like Ms. Adams was trying to establish a link between us, and now we're opting to cell phones. We were joking, about actually using postage stamps and regular letters and mail, because this has gotten pretty old school at this point. So I apologize for that. She does too, and I just want you to know that if that's going on and there's not a reason for a technical problem, something that you should be aware of. You got somebody's attention, so well done.
Yeah, hats off to us. We do have somebody's attention, and actually the information you've been bringing forward definitely has somebody's attention, because it requires that others would be held in the hot seat for not answering the things that you put out there. So give us a quick update as to what has happened since we last spoke for you.
Sure. So just to do a quick recap for anybody that doesn't know, I did a legal mandamus, which is a legal document to petition the federal government, the executive branch, and the president to conduct a police action through the United Nations and a coalition force against Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro, who's unlawfully leading as an authoritarian in Venezuela. And this is the stem of most of our problems. And my mandamus was shut down immediately by Judge Thomas Barber. Didn't even view it before the White House even received their copy of it. And then I did a follow-on interview because Nicolas Maduro and his staff were going down to Brazil at the request of President Silva Lulu, the Brazilian president, and they were having a meeting. So again, that was a real, shocker, kind of eye-opener issue. So if we fast forward to today, the results of that meeting are this, that Silva Lulu in Brazil and Nicolas Maduro are both communist, very, very far leftist communist governments. And Silva Lulu was founded for a great deal of corruption, but all of a sudden these courts in Brazil overturned his corruption, allowing him to go ahead and become the president of their country. And in Venezuela, of course, Maduro is murdering everybody to maintain power and allying himself with China, Russia, and Iran, as well as terrorist groups, both Sunni and Shia. We talked about, Hezbollah being Shia, backed by Iran, and Sunni, which is like ISIS now, or ISIL, or prior Al Qaeda, which is Sunni dominant. And we also talked about cartels. The Sun cartels down there does business with a lot of other cartels. So now, when we fast forward to today, the results of that meeting were that President Lulu made huge mistakes, according to many news articles. And these mistakes involved the fact that they only listed 2 countries, which I found kind of odd because 9 countries all protested at the UN. But the 2 primary were Uruguay and Chile, demanding the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. And so in a manner which they protested to the UN, which includes the United States, by the way, and no action was taken. However, they were quick to put out that the United States Department of Justice does have arrest warrants for Maduro and all his senior staff cronies. I find this kind of odd because last year, the State Department decided to go down and deal with Maduro as though he were the leader of Venezuela and not Juan Guaido, who's lawfully elected. And in the fact that the State Department, when dealt with known quote-unquote fugitives, according to the Department of Justice, who have taken no action to arrest him, I find that, double standard. That's straight up, that's a double standard, and that's also a felony crime to, consort with known felons. And if the United States was so hell-bent on arresting Maduro, they had their opportunity when he traveled to Brazil, when he was in Brazil, and when he returned from Brazil. The content of the conversation between President Lulu out of Brazil and Maduro out of Venezuela was to find a way to combat U.S. sanctions against Venezuela and U.S. Authoritarian rule, according to what they stated in news articles. These are their quotes. I find this really absurd. I really do. I know that many other countries protested the fact that there was this meeting and there was no arrest. In the prior Latin American conference that was being held in South America in March, Venezuela, Maduro actually didn't attend it because he had heard several countries had planned to arrest him when he goes there. So he averted that and claimed he had COVID. And we talked about that before. But what you need to understand, what I'm trying to get across to you, is that there are these patterns of misconduct. Okay? So for any regular citizen, or even if you're a company owner or you work in government yourself, you will never be afforded the opportunity to both deal with a felon and then still maintain your position. It's not going to happen. And that's what the State Department did with the Department of Justice. And obviously, we're not getting any true or straight answers from anybody about why this was allowed to take place. So my mandamus was about conducting this police action to arrest them, go down, forcibly arrest them out of their own country in a police action that would not involve a war or conflict, and remove these countries like China, Russia, and Iran out of our hemisphere, and then further to go ahead and to deal with some of the cartel and to deal with some of the terrorist-related matters. And of course, if you remember, this all goes back to the massive immigration influx in the United States southern borders. Yes. Because this is exactly what happened. 7.1 million Venezuelan refugees. What country can house them? Where's the United Nations? So
yes, that's like New York City coming to America and being distributed. Now there is, like I said before, a state of emergency in upstate New York. And David Gould, who is the mayor for Cortland, New York, and Cuyahoga County, all these counties, like near Syracuse and so on, are having this happen. Isn't it strange, though? I mean, I'm just pointing it out, that Biden was here not too long ago because he was helping to sort of put his stamp on, no pun intended, put his stamp on a new company that's opening here that's a super high-tech company that has to do with microchips and other things that will be manufactured there in Syracuse. And so a lot of that's happening in upstate New York right now. It's kind of curious to me. But go ahead, William, please.
Well, let's just be realistic about who the blame should go to. President Biden and his son Hunter Biden are straight-up criminals, all right? They took illegal monies. They're still taking monies from adversaries. They've lied. They've hidden classified material, which they had no right to have access to, by the way. And they're not being charged or held accountable. So let's just put that whole scenario with the president and his kid to the side, okay? Now we look at the president's staff. These are the people that are really pushing him with these policies and to do things. And if you look at President Biden, he's an older gentleman, and he's not really able to even form a full sentence, to be honest with you, sometimes. And that really does hinder him from being able to effectively lead. So you got to ask yourself, how many of these people in this staff of his or inside the White House and around the White House are ground guiding the president to go and do these endorsements in these places? He's already a criminal from stuff he was in full control of, and he knows. And regardless of his age, he needs to be charged. But separate from that, I can't see him making a decision on his own to go and endorse these kinds of plants or, movements of immigrants, or, dealing with China the way he's doing, and also to ignore Venezuela and the policies that they did, or not to send federally, troops to the border when terrorists cross. I mean, you really have to ask yourself what's going on. If we go back to when Afghanistan was withdrawing, and I talked about that ad nauseum, but I'm going to tell you, when the Afghanistan withdrawal took place, a lot of leaders were patting themselves on the back about the fact that they were able to evacuate 124,000 people from Afghanistan. And out of that, they only evacuated 20,000 known people, and there's 104,000 in the United States today that are unknowns. We have no idea who they are. They're probably Taliban, Al-Qaeda, whatever. And then, by the way, we decided to leave a large amount, over 5,000 U.S. citizens in Afghanistan, which many are still stuck in Afghanistan today. So you really have to look at the concept about what the priorities work are and how this president, who is in charge, don't get me wrong, but he is also a criminal, not being charged, and he needs to be. But who's pushing him to go do these types of events? He could not keep up at his age with the types of things going on.
Well, if it's even him. I mean, people seem to think it's not even real. It's not even the person. And that person, no matter what, there's some other rogue entity that's around surrounding that, allowing this to take place.
Now, another thing I talked about before was President Trump. Now, President Trump did some good things, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a real fan because he lost the rule of law and he did not control the COVID virus. And he did a host of other things that were wrong, like putting his eggs into Michael Flynn's basket, which General Michael Flynn is a bad guy, just so everybody knows. But the thing about Trump that you have to be sympathetic to is the whole concept of he's being charged with holding classified material as a former sitting president. And then they took, that was not part of the warrant, they took his passports, and instead of returning them and apologizing, they doubled down, came out and stated he's a flight risk. Now, I don't know why President Trump hasn't sued the federal government for slander and defamation, because that was completely illegal, or why he hasn't sued over the fact that that warrant was not a reasonable warrant. But he had the authority to have those documents and to declassify them when he chose to. And he could give a verbal command that means that they're declassified, which he did before he left the White House. Instead, the Department of Justice has come out recently using what's called hearsay evidence from third-party people. Well, somebody there heard the president say, oh, look at all these classified documents I got, and I didn't even declassify them. So now we have a third-party person that's not verified or validated giving testimony about the fact that he overheard the president, but not testifying under oath. So you're going to write a sworn statement to that effect, but you're going to stay anonymous, and they're using that hearsay evidence that goes completely against the Constitution and the laws of the United States. So you got to ask yourself, okay, if the president had the right to do it, or a former president, why is he being charged and going through this nightmare? Because this hearing in Miami, they preferred against him over 27 charges primarily, and from everybody from, the National Archives, which have never charged anybody with anything. But President Joe Biden, when he was a senator, had more than 50,000 documents in his garage that were classified above his level too, because they're mostly secret. But, top secret and above is above your level, and that requires a two-key system and a secure facility with an armed guard. So I mean, there's a host of double standards going on here. So whether you like Trump or not, the fact that if you take his name out of the equation, you see that he was railroaded and that not a lot of people are giving him any credit or helping. But then again, he's not helping himself either by not going after the source of these types of matters. Hearsay evidence doesn't count in a court of law. Hearsay evidence is just somebody said, I heard this from a distance. And if you're not going to go on under oath, then how can you say that emphatically that it's true? It's not. And then beyond that, the fact that he declassified documents verbally, it's basically the president's intent. It doesn't matter if they still say secret. He said, I declassified them. That means that they are declassified. He's one of the few people in the country that can declassify documents. The President of the United States, the head of the clearance court can do it as well, and so can the classifier. That's the person that made the classification on the document. So there's a lot to be said about his being mishandled intentionally, and then everything with Biden and Hunter Biden being thrown under the rug. And then if we get to Ukraine, I'm sorry, Ms. Adams, did you have a question or something?
No, go ahead. I'll comment in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, so if we get to Ukraine, the Ukrainian people are going through an absolute nightmare. Everybody in the world supported the Ukrainians to fight out the Russian aggressors, okay? And when the United States started giving material supply along with NATO allies and other things, we did the right thing. But then we became offensive. We started providing offensive material. And it's okay to provide some of that, but not as much as we are. And President Zelensky had the opportunity to work out a deal with Putin to stop hostilities. And that deal could have easily stopped them. You know, I'm not going to get into the politics behind that, but this president has really pushed for the Ukrainian government to continue to fight at the expense of all the civilians in Ukraine. President Zelensky knew his people were being categorically killed and his cities being totally destroyed. And once the Donbas and Donbass regions, along with Crimea and maybe a small other part, could have been seceded to the Russians temporarily to at least do a ceasefire to allow civilian casualties and allow humanitarian aid to come in, it would have been better. But instead, the West is pushing Ukraine, and President Zelensky is pushing on it as well, to keep going in this conflict. And there's a lot more at stake about this because of Burisma. Burisma puts President Biden and his son Hunter Biden in direct gun sights of those people that have criminal charges against them for taking unlawful monies. So you got to ask, I mean, a few people around the world, you're talking like a handful, like 10 or 20 people around the world right now are dictating the fate of millions, literally, because of their criminal past. Why? So yeah, I've got some angst about all this stuff. And this is my opinion. I mean, you're more than welcome to look up stuff and research yourself. But in my humble opinion, I see that a resolution should have been made already, even concessions made, just to stop the madness, so to speak. But this is like a full steam ahead kind of thing.
Well, it's happening in all directions simultaneously. It got going and was allowed to continue going under the guise of, depending upon which side of the fence you're looking at it or from what perspective, Putin's taking out the chemical warfare in the Ukraine. Do you know about that? Do you know if that's true from your days in CENTCOM?
No, nothing from CENTCOM, but I mean, the news has reported that there were biolabs that were there that the U.S. was using along with others, and that Putin is claiming he's taking those out. But again, that's political rhetoric, in my opinion. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I know they're there, according to the media anyways, but that's not an excuse for invading and trying to destroy an entire country. There's a lot of bad blood there. There's way above my knowledge of the politics for the last several years of what's going on to really comment on that. I just say that the civilians are the ones suffering right now, and the Ukrainian military is beating the Russians back to a point where Putin will talk and Zelensky will listen, and that's what my opinion is. And I think they should, because there's just too many civilian deaths, no matter how much you want to keep every inch of your country. And if there's dealing with the biolabs, reported on, or part of a bigger picture of something that's now or whatever, I just don't have enough details on it too much other than what I've read.
So going back to Trump for a minute, I think this charade is continued in this manner. Why is it not being taken down? Because obviously you know that there is the narrative that Trump is saving America. He's going to come back and save America. He's doing all this. Why do you think this is still being allowed to go on?
Well, look, I can tell you that on Trump's side, okay, the bottom line up front with him is that if they keep on pushing and pressing him with all these illegal kinds of actions and they do stuff, it doesn't matter if it's Trump or somebody else, that person is going to get sympathy of everybody, not just in the United States, because they're going to say that this guy is being railroaded. The laws aren't on his side. I don't like him or his politics, but I do see that he's being railroaded, and that's not right. I mean, just think about when you get pulled over by a cop and you get a speeding ticket, and you know you weren't speeding, and then you got to go to court and fight that. Think about that. Well, this president sitting in his house, and all of a sudden, an FBI armed task force comes in and raids his compound without notifying the state of Florida, which violated laws, goes through everything without, any kind of concession to the fact that he's a former president, and then goes beyond the scope of the warrant and takes stuff that's not on the warrant, and then they double down and they say that he's a flight risk. Right. How is a billionaire who's a former sitting president, who's never been arrested for anything, a flight risk? That doesn't make any sense. So everybody's going to be sympathetic to Trump. And I think his campaign team knows that, and they want to keep running the ball with that as well. It's kind of like what we talked about with Governor Abbott, not really pushing the federal government to bring their troops in and to secure the border because terrorists crossed the line. He's wanting to make a political statement by getting some of these immigrants and sending them by bus to other states, sanctuary cities. The first time he did it, that's fine. But now you continue to do that kind of stuff, and you really have a real problem. You should have shut the border down already.
So what's the real purpose of moving everybody around? I mean, it sounds to me like, I can't imagine that all the people, the refugees that are coming from Venezuela are all people that are with some kind of intent to do something within America. I can't believe that. There may be those that are mixed in, but, there's a whole load of people coming up here. They can't all be bad.
It goes back to the root cause of all the problems. If you remove Maduro and his cronies, Venezuelans can go home. And it's not just Venezuela. There's many other countries sending their undesirables and other bad guys and malfeasant guys to mix in with these crowds of poor refugees that need help.
Yeah.
The only way to help them is to remove Maduro. That's not apparently an option for this government, even though they've got supposedly a warrant for his arrest and a bounty on his head for $15 million. So, we go back to the same thing. It's like you look at the bad guy, here's a $15 million bounty, here's a warrant for his arrest, the guy's standing right across from you, and you wave at him and say, hey, how are you doing? You mind if I talk to you for a minute? Maybe we can have some kind of arrangement and deal? And that's what the State Department did last year with Venezuela. And the Department of Justice still has these multiple felony warrants out, along with the bounty. So now you've colluded with a felon, so what does that make the people in the State Department that ordered that? Isn't that like, obstruction of justice, right? Collusion and colluding with, collaboration, conspiracy. I mean, these are all the kinds of racketeering. These are all the kinds of charges criminally that you can think of that should be levied. None of them have been.
How are people getting away with this? How is the military not taking a stand in any of this? Because really what's happening, in my opinion, and you can see it again, I'm going to call out Monkey Works again. He's out there showing people what's happening in real time, and there seems to be an uptick of activity over the East Coast and over us. So what's going on? I mean, what's really the play, the bigger play that's happening here?
The play is for control. The idea that the government has enough control to manipulate the narrative of all media outlets, and anybody that doesn't sign up with that, consortium will be denigrated or, discredited. And that's one thing. Another thing is to control the people to allow things to happen. It's almost like you're inviting people in to the point where there are so many desperate people that need assistance mixed in with cartels and terrorist guys, mixed in with foreign adversary nationals that want to do harm to the United States. I mean, if you look around the country now, you look at places like Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and other places around the country, they look like, a third world nation. Tents up everywhere, drugs going everywhere, drug addicts. I mean, Mexico's using Philadelphia as an example on anti-drug ads in their country. Think about that. That's horrific. That this is a first-rate country, and we're allowing it to go down the tubes. We were energy independent under Trump, and now we have to beg, borrow, and steal oil from other people just to run our stuff. And everyone says, oh, go to the electric cars. Great. Those power plants run off of fuel. The same fuel that runs in your freaking engines. So you want to sit there and talk shop about being eco-friendly with an electric car. Great. How does that electricity get generated? Unless there's a dam nearby or unless you're using the nuclear power plants, you're really using regular fossil fuels like coals and other oils and other substances to go ahead and to run that power. So, the idea that President Biden shut down all the independent operations, not just for oil, but for natural gas, made no sense. And then Saudi Arabia, we discussed why the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia won't deal with the United States on oil issues because we're supporting Iran and they're supporting the war with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And we lost control of the Middle East where it's Shia dominant, backed by Iran. So, yeah, they're not going to deal with this. So instead, we'll just go down and talk to Maduro, our favorite murderer, and we'll go ahead and ask him for some oil. And by the way, violate, these arrest warrants and the fact that he's a terrorist and head of a cartel and all that doesn't really matter. Oh, yeah, and he's communist, by the way, right? And, of course, he goes down and talks to Brazil about how to get the United States out. So we've got all that going on with all these immigrant refugees coming into the United States. We are really hurt in a huge way. And it's a simple fix. It's just getting Maduro out and moving Venezuela, putting them back home. They would love to go home. I'm sure of it. I would say 80% of the people that came here from Venezuela and other countries would want to go back home. South and Central America stabilized a little bit. And that's a fact. I mean, you can look at that up, or you can look it up in the United Nations numbers on what people are saying, and you can go down there and take a look at how the whole scenery and landscape would change for terrorist activity, cartel activity, foreign adversary activity, immigrations activity, refugee status, and the list goes on.
It seems to me that this is a bigger play within a play, honestly, and people have been given full closure as to what's going on, but they don't believe it. They don't want to. Instead, they're going to get caught up in the narrative, which is always the case. I mean, you've watched it for years, and what you do, one side will say this, the other side will say that, and everybody's busy with the argument instead of what's going on behind and around the scenes. So what is going on? Let's talk about Mike Pence for a minute. What do you think about him stepping into this so-called phony race?
Well, I think Pence's record as a governor was really undercut. He needed to really have people put his record when he was governor of Indiana out there. He did a really phenomenal job. And he's Christian, and a lot of people came up with these narratives about him being some kind of devil worshiper or some garbage like that. These conspiracy theorists, they do more damage than good to anybody. And I think that Mike Pence, he's not as aggressive as he needs to be, but I think he's a good candidate. He's a rock solid kind of guy in a lot of ways. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I say he's really a rock solid guy.
I don't like his energy. I think he's untrustworthy. When I watch his energy from the first moment he stood on stage with Trump, I felt like he had it out for him. I never felt confident in that. And I don't have a good reason why. Maybe we'll just call it intuitive.
Let me give you a reason. So when President Trump took the White House and got into the Oval Office, and Mike Pence is the vice president, on his 17th day in office, it was his 7th day in office, General Michael Flynn, who is now the National Security Advisor, right, lied to his face directly. And when the vice president asked him why he did that, he tried to lie again. And he lied a third time. And Mike Pence was very clear to President Trump on what he wanted done. This man is untrustworthy. He's a complete liar. And Chris Christie, the former federal prosecutor, the governor of New Jersey, even stated that Mike Flynn was like gum on the bottom of your shoe. You can't get rid of him. But it came out that basically President Trump tried to defend Flynn to Mike Pence, the vice president. And Pence wasn't having it. From that day forward, that's where you see a lot of his negative energy, because he was being controlled by the president and not allowed to put his foot forward to say what's right or wrong. I think he found that reprehensible, but didn't know how to react to that or do anything further. What do? Do you resign as a vice president and then let somebody else that's going to kiss his butt take over? Or are you going to sit there as vice president and try to do all you can? I mean, this is what really went on with Vice President Pence. I don't know how that's impacted him over these last several years and if he's changed a lot, but I know what his record was.
Well, it seems to me that there's more to be revealed. The fact that he stepped into this is very strange to me. And that every single perpetuating this kind of fraud that's going on, instead of anyone stopping and correcting really for the people. What I can see, there's nobody stopping and correcting for the people at all. They're just moving on with a race, asking everybody that's already taxed for more money and asking them to fight one another. It's no different than a civil war. It's already happening. Maduro doesn't need to do much. It's already happening.
But it's happening by design. This is what I'm saying with the Democrats controlling the narrative. If they control the narrative of the media, then they can do pretty much anything they want. And the people will be behind them. And any media outlet that wants to stand up and say something negative, they'll turn out like Fox News that has these little ball races on Sundays, on the studio, like everybody wants to see that. And One American News have been shut out of a lot of networks. And I'm not saying they're great, but they're better than some of the others. But there's not a lot of truth coming out. And that's a real problem. Once you control that narrative and you have allied support from overseas, from other people and from within the country, including companies and corporations, it's kind of hard, like when companies like Google are on your side, because they can manipulate all kinds of data. They can do all kinds of things. So this is all the dangers that we've been facing. And then the border is allowed God knows how many people in the country and what types of people they are. They're not all Latin American. I mean, there's Chinese, Russians, Germans, Haitians, all kinds of people rolling in through the southern border. I mean, and you can't say they all have good purposes. There's a lot of them that are just seeking asylum for help, but then mixed in there are some of these nefarious bad guys that need to be stopped, and they're not. And this is why, if the country implodes on itself, no one's going to care. And like I talked in one piece with you about catastrophe, in order for anybody to follow the federal government, there has to be either a massive catastrophe on U.S. soil or multiple minor catastrophes that happen that allow the government to maintain a firmer grip and more control. Like when, 9/11 took place, FISA was created. And that means that a lot of people will have a lot of their information shut down, a lot of their access removed, a lot of truth about what's going on will fall under the banner of national security. And we like to overclassify things so people don't know about it, which is unlawful as well. But that's the type of things that are happening. So if Biden can't win a natural race, then they're going to try to maintain these kinds of narratives. And I look to the fact that something catastrophic could be happening. Doesn't mean it's going to be an attack of like an explosion or something. It could be an economic attack. It could be a power grid attack. It could be anything, or smoke screen, So this is where everything comes out. People start to see this. But we did talk about, how people do know when they start learning things, they stand up and they fight, just like they did with Budweiser. I know it's a minor example, but it happened with other things as well. Schools are starting to get slammed about all this unlawful material in classes for kids and everything else. I mean, so, people in America are speaking up now. Just the choice of candidates for these presidential elections are thin, and I don't know the purpose behind it. I think Trump likes the limelight, whether it's like a kid, you either get good attention or you're going to get bad attention. I just want attention one way or the other. And then with Biden, it's like, he's got a whole team of people supporting him to maintain the presidency, and they'll just manipulate him as puppet masters while he's there.
Well, considering that I could never even get by those people to have that sit-down meeting with Russell J. Gould and Trump, it really showed me the depth of what's going on. And Russell even called himself, and they hung up on him at the White House. I think there'll be a day of reckoning for that. It's kind of interesting. But people, excuse me, maybe need to know that if both parties are not really legitimately there, then what is going on that's making this go on for so long? I know everyone's saying, oh, there's people commenting about tribunals, and these people they're just, people that are actors in place of, because these people have already been rounded up and sent to Gitmo. Do you know anything about that?
No, I've not heard anything about that.
Because it seems to me that, sure, that could sound great. It would be a great narrative to justify, say, what's happening until something more catastrophic happens. And then everybody has to turn their attention away from that narrative to what's taking place in their backyard, so to speak. Now, I know that there's been a huge narrative going on out there about aliens and alien invasion and so on. Did you hear anything about that when you were in the service?
No, but that's just a convenient cover story.
For what actions and narratives you mean that they're creating?
Yeah. What better excuse to cover up a narrative of something else and put out, we got aliens? I mean, who's not going to drop their coffee and stop and listen and say, wait, what'd you say? I mean, that's the reality behind it. The most dramatic, affecting story that's going to get everybody's heads turned in and outside the United States. Well, that's, hey, we detected alien life that's advanced. They're probably going to come here and suck your brains out, something like that. I mean, this is exactly the kind of fear-mongering tactics that people can use. It's not saying there's not real aliens. No, that's not what it is. But it's a convenient cover story to be used when they want to divert attention.
Right. Well, it seems like there's 3 different narratives going on at once. There's the so-called blue narrative. There's the so-called red narrative. And there is the military-industrial complex narrative, not the one that I'm talking about with you, that you worked in, but there's a whole nother complex to that that's, again, compartmentalized, apparently, that might have a hand in what's going on. So we heard a while back Sergeant Horton, if you remember his name, talking about how the military is really only defending the base flag. Do you know about that?
No.
Okay, so the base flag is apparently all that they can defend since 1999, when Russell came in to do what he did. In your time there, did you ever hear about Russell J. Gould?
No.
So they don't even talk about it. They don't know. You don't know what he did in 1999. And isn't it interesting that nobody on either side of this narrative, I'm not talking about you tonight, but rather the red, the blue, and the industrial complex, no one's talking about any of that. No one's saying any of it. Yes.
Well, they did something in 1999 that resulted in, a rule or regulation change or a policy or a law changing. Everybody would have known about it. Nobody knows anything about it. So what did he do?
Well, that's a long, involved story, but he basically took back the Title IV flag so it wouldn't go back to the British rule. And Clinton knew about it. Clinton knew at the time what took place. It's just perpetuated. I think the bigger question I have right now is, why are we even going forward into elections? Why are we even moving forward further into any elections whatsoever when we can't even get straight what's happening? Like, change of election is not going to change this country because it's already been changed. But we don't have anyone that's following what you said, the rule of law. You said Trump lost the rule of law. When did he first lose that?
2 years into his presidency, he lost it.
What did he do exactly that had him lose it?
When the cities were getting hit with this, well, some of it was racial, some of it was Antifa riots. There was a lot of talk about allowing them to get their frustrations out. Now, in any normal society, to allow a group of youths that are teenage all the way up to in their 30s, to go and to destroy cities, burn cities, kill cops. That's allowing them to get their anger out of their system. And we have a problem. That's a big problem. And it stemmed from the top. The idea that all of this went down and there was no official response from the White House to enforce the rule of law. And at the same time, we know that the impeachment hearings were going on against Trump. But then with COVID, we lost the rule of law. And Trump deferred everything to the CDC and Fauci. Now, that's unlawful. You didn't even bother to confirm or deny who's got COVID, how many, whatever. You just based it off of what Fauci said and what foreign countries were doing. We're the United States. We don't follow foreign countries, all right? Then, even though you were told about this stuff, it came out that Fauci was involved with the proliferation of this, strain of SARS or MERS virus in the corona family to create the COVID-19. How odd is that? But no one knew about it until just about 6 weeks, 2 months ago. That's
right.
Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the federal government under Trump promised payments for COVID deaths and for COVID treatments, and then ordered FEMA to provide material supplies like breathing apparatuses and a bunch of expendable items like, masks and gloves and blah, blah, blah. And they were auctioning these items off like Governor Cuomo did in New York. So nobody went back after them. Even Hurricane Irma and hitting Puerto Rico, the U.S. government provided $91 billion. You could have bought Puerto Rico 10 times over for that amount.
Right, exactly.
We only got $7 billion.
Well,
and, the list continues to go on. But the fact that Trump also stood by Mike Flynn, and I know he pardoned him to show that he did commit criminal activities, tells me that Mike Flynn or General Flynn must have some kind of blackmail on Trump that he can't just ignore. So he did his due diligence and pardoned him, showing, yes, you did commit a crime, which you really did. And they ignored Judge Sullivan. Oh, everyone wanted to beat up Judge Sullivan. Oh, he's a Democrat. He's this, he's that. Ridiculous. Judge Sullivan followed the law. So we had a lot of problems, and that's how the rule of law was lost and continued to stay lost. It's so absurd. If you want to give an example of what's going on today to see what's happening in beforehand, the president and the executive branch right now are trying to do the student loan repayment program.
Yeah.
Okay? The executive branch does not have the power of the purse or the money. That's the Congress. And now they're going to the Supreme Court to try to override the Congress because they want to buy off young people's votes. They don't have the legal authority to do that. They do not. And no matter how it comes out, if the Supreme Court sides with the president on this, that's the end of, the law as we know it in this country. But by the same, token, the Congress has done more lip service than any action whatsoever. And we spoke about that. And now the Democrats are coming out today screaming and yelling, we can't do an impeachment on Biden like Marjorie Greene's doing out of, Georgia. We can't do the impeachment because it'll take away from the American people. But meanwhile, Adam Schiff is still a congressman. He flat out lied under oath during Trump's impeachment hearings. He even fabricated evidence. Why is he not in jail? Why is he still a congressman? So, yeah, we've got some issues that have to be resolved. The rule of law is a very significant rule that has to be brought back into focus. And what they're doing is the Biden administration is putting people in charge of these administrations like the Department of Justice or the FBI or others that are favorable to them, and they are making policy rules. And you either follow these rules or you're fired, which you really can't technically fire somebody, but you can put them through the ringer and force them out. And that would be like loss of pension, loss of job, loss of finance, everything. So they're threatening people within. That's why these IGs, Inspector Generals, are so important. And using them gives some kind of protection to them. And whether it's a whistleblower act or whether it's an unfair, unbiased act, Equal Opportunity Act, Sexual Harassment Act, these agencies under the IG and the IG itself have to be honored. And that's why in the law, the IGs have even more authority than the president does in certain circumstances. And when the inspector general comes across a criminality or a criminal event, they refer it to the Department of Justice. And that's not being utilized. So when I talk to your listeners about everybody can do an IG complaint, and it should be. If there's 10,000 listeners and you guys want to all do an IG complaint about
quantum,
President Biden, yeah, then they should do it.
In quantum.
You can do it online.
Yes. And I know people are putting in the quantum amicus curiae, but what you're suggesting is where to direct that to some degree. It's just a ridiculous conundrum that this farce continues. At what point we lost our footing for real is back in 1999, I'm quite sure. And at this point, the real question I have to ask, based on everything that you're saying, is how is it that this is allowed to continue? How is it that any of this can happen? But the problem is, like what you've been warning us about, is there's a bigger play at hand. And the bigger play is still advancing, whether we like it or not, no matter what. And that play could have impact on us here as citizens. And we need to basically call forward a change and call forward that change immediately, because we may be impacted by that sooner than later. I don't think the flow that's coming across the border is going to stop, and no one seems to be interested in stopping it. And from what you last said, Maduro is on a hot trail to make sure that we're a third world country. So besides IG complaints and so on, and if you did them in quantum, that might have more of an impact for those out there that can do that. What do you see as the next step, and where are we lined up? What is the point about Trump at this point that you want to express?
Well, if Trump gets into office, literally in 30 days or less, he could actually course correct the entire country and our foreign policy in a heartbeat. It requires a specific amount of executive orders written in a certain way to basically clean up, and I'll say it again, clean up our executive branch of government. The executive branch covers Department of Defense, Department of State, it covers Department of Justice. It covers the CIA, FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, you name it. All these agencies, National Archives, it covers Department of Energy, you name it. It can all be corrected. ICE, immigrations, everything. It can all be corrected. 30 days or less. And it also can clean up the media. And what I mean by that is, under the law, if the media does something that goes outside the norms by spinning a story too much or lying about it, basically the FCC can hold them accountable and financially fine their whole company and publicize their wrongdoings.
It comes down to the corporations, is what you're saying. It comes down to the backslap to the corporations. It's really the money trail at the end of the day, because like you said, if we can put up 91 billion or something to Costa Rica or somewhere and it goes missing, certainly there's enough money to run this government and make all of America great again, for real, without fundraising for any campaign.
That it would be important, if Trump were to get elected as president again, that he would go ahead and take control of all the executive branch offices, because he's the head of the executive branch, and he can do that through a series of executive orders, and he can weed out bad guys, and then he can also put the media on notice and start charging media personalities that help to influence rioting with criminal actions, and he can charge media companies for falsehood stories or other things through the federal government. And that's the way you rein the media back in, so that they can't go off left or right and do what they're doing right now, get away with saying outrageous things and inciting riots and other things. So it can be done in a very simplistic manner. It just depends if the president gets into office and wants to do it. If he wants to do it. And that's the whole point. And if somebody's going to ground guide him not to do it that way because something's more beneficial to somebody else, then there's a problem. Right. If you look across the country at all the cities that have been hit with all this turmoil and violence in the last several years, How many of these downtown neighborhoods in Baltimore, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, I mean, you can name the city. How many of them have lost businesses? Everything from CVS and Walgreens to Walmarts and to, clothing stores and to small grocery stores. They've all moved out of these districts. Now these people that live in those centers that aren't responsible for the riots or the violence because outsiders were brought in, now they're screwed. They can't even go down and get a normal prescription filled. Now they got to drive 20, 30 miles to go do that. Imagine an older person that's by themselves trying to maintain, and they have to go do that. Imagine somebody who's handicapped. Imagine somebody that's requiring medication, and then the family's struggling with 2-3 jobs.
Well, I have a complete problem with Trump raising funds when he's a billionaire. I have a problem with him asking for any donation anywhere, anyone for that matter. I mean, this whole system is so downtrodden and just fake at this point. It seems like we just need to start again. And in a way, that's already been done, but no one's looking at that. So the people, again, get skated over while everybody puts their hand out saying, we're going to help you, we're going to fix you, but could we have a donation for that? Do you mind if we, I can support me, of course, and an entire country with my wealth, but I need a donation to do my campaign. That just doesn't seem to add up anymore. It just seems wrong.
Well, I mean, there's certain campaign laws. I don't know all the details behind them, why he can't use all of his own money. I mean, there's certain reasons for it, I'm sure. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're good reasons. I'm just saying that there probably are. And at the same time, you've got to look at, right now, Trump is doing a great job in destroying the playing field of anybody else that's going to challenge him. He's doing it because the federal government is charging him. So now he's got the sympathy card. Remember what I told you. It doesn't matter who's in that seat. If you're the guy in that seat and Trump plays the TV, and like I said, he's got to get attention, whether it's good or bad attention. It doesn't matter. It's like a little kid. If you're not going to give me positive attention, I'm going to make some problems, and you're going to deal with me in a disciplinary manner. I mean, that's how little kids get it sometimes, attention. So he's getting that attention. He's playing it right. So he's destroying the playing field for everybody. And then Governor DeSantis does this dumb bill down here to get rid of any undocumented people by July 1st. Caused a mass exodus from the state of Florida. And then he's gallivanting around the country campaigning for president. I mean, I think him and Trump are working together. They're colluding. I think they're doing the fighting between each other. And Trump's making it out like I'm the woe is me, poor guy. I'm stuck in a court in Miami over something I didn't even do. So,
well, Melania said that would happen. She's the one that said it's just a game, it's a play, and in August or so they'll come together and they'll play on the same team. And she just put it out there in a post. She just landed. So the whole thing go away and not use his own money paid first round. I know, because I got letters asking for money and in the campaign, and you get this if you do that, and so on. People were sending him money. People did send in money. This is the part that people need to wake up to, that this is a much deeper arm, and the arm is not correcting. That's the problem. So,
well, remember, I told you about this in our last couple of talks about Trump and DeSantis and everybody playing. They're playing a game to get Trump out there. And then when everybody falls off the wagon and it's Trump left standing, then everybody's going to support him at the end of the day. So maybe a few, but mostly they will.
Better bring Russell J. Gould in, because there has to be a correction in the functionality of the system. And that correction looks like it can only happen in one way at this point. So, William, we have to wrap it up, but I want to ask if there's anything else that you really want people to know tonight that you find pressing, or something that they need to pay attention to that maybe could inspire them in a manner that would help them.
I would just say this. I'd be careful of listening to a lot of these people on, YouTube or other places that are putting out these false narratives, whether they're for your side or against your side. I would encourage you to look at just regular Americans around the country, and you start seeing a trend of Americans actually starting to stand up. And they're standing up in a manner where they're making a difference in their local and their state areas. And I'd ask you to join that difference. Whether you have an opinion or not doesn't, make a difference. It should be out there so others can see what, you're saying or doing. I think you have a voice, and I think you need to use it like many other Americans are doing. There's success coming. It's slow, but it's maturing. And a lot of times the media is not reporting how many just downright regular Americans are fed up with things, and they've done something about it. That doesn't mean go out and, wave banners and signs in D.C. or something. But you can get online. You can deal with these inspector generals. You can deal with your congressmen and senators and governors. The more people that write, the less they can ignore you. They have to take you seriously.
I think that's the most important point that you've made through all of this, all the way along, is that numbers speak, and they can't ignore that. Whether it's in fiction, whether it's in quantum, whether it's in anything, they can't ignore that. There is a certain tipping point to numbers, correct?
There is, absolutely. People can't just ignore the numbers of things going on. Remember, people belong to different groups, whether they think they do or not. Whether it's church groups, school groups, whether it's regular groups, if they're working for, government, whether it's military, law enforcement, whatever. These are all different groups. And a lot of people in there, they speak. They may not speak openly at work as much as you would like, but they have their own opinions, and you can, get a feel for how so-and-so is thinking of, or what they feel for this or that individual, or that law or that thing. But you can see the difference. One minor example, like in the state of Florida, is right now, for example, as a pickup truck. If you go to buy a brand new pickup truck, they went from $40,000 and $50,000. They went up to like $60,000 to $80,000 because the economy goes up. So now these dealers think they're going to make this killing of money. Well, right now they're screwed because the supply is incredible and the demand is so far down. It's not even funny. So now they have to start reducing their prices. So this is an example of how numbers work really well. If you're supplying the numbers of people saying, hey, congressman or senator or governor, so-and-so, we need this and this and this, the more that goes on, the less they're likely to be able to walk away from that and ignore it. So maybe it's a poor example just saying trucks, but I'm just looking at anything that might give you an indicator for a litmus test on what I'm talking about. These numbers count for a lot. And remember, IG complaints always have a 2-year shelf life as a report. So once you've done an IG complaint, it's automatically on file for 2 years. So you can't get out of that. So even if the court doesn't want to hear what you have to say, the IGs have to.
Important, guys, the IG reports. So where does one send that in exactly? The Inspector General, is that it? The No Spector General?
Just go to Google or whatever your search engine is, type in Inspector General for the Department of Defense, Inspector General for the Department of State, President of the United States, Governor so-and-so, whatever. And those Inspector General's offices will come up, and then you can do a tip and do a report, or you could call in and do a report. You can do it, like I said, from the luxury of your own home, right behind your own computer. You can do that pretty well.
All right, guys. Thank you, William. Thank you, Sergeant Cotel, for being with us again and for sharing your knowledge, your point of view, and most of all, your experience. Your fearlessness in continuing to try is important. More people need to come on board and understand not only what he's talking about, but maybe even the quantum as well. And to have, I put out that post for you all the other week. If you didn't catch that, go back to the community page, and I put out the Syntax Learning Center post, and I started it at the Title IV flag position there. So take a listen to that. I think it's 12 minutes in or something. That's worth your time in listening to. And I think everyone has a part in this because nobody else can do it for you. So we don't get the handout and the soup line. It may not go down like that, and Mother Nature might have a bigger say as well. So maybe it's time to stand up with responsibility no matter how and take that forward. I agree that numbers count, William, and I thank you for taking your time to continue in your way in what you're doing and continue to ruffle the feathers. And just by the fact that we couldn't get on tonight, that we saw in front of us what was happening in every avenue we tried. that they definitely do not want the conversation to be happening. So thank you for everything that you've done and will do.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Did you have any particular questions for William? If you did, you can ask them. You can always email me and we can bring them on again if you want to. But basically, you need to kind of take a look at the bigger world picture and how it's playing out right now. Because the now is what's kind of on the plate. And the now is still rolling. And there may be other nows that are still rolling. They'll challenge what's happening right now. But we have the light at our side. I do believe that. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks for hanging in there and the tech issues that continue to step in the way. And thank you for your love and support. So again, thank you, Sergeant William Cotel, and appreciate your time with us tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for everything, and you go Jolly. I tried to put out the 5G thing again today as a test. They chunked the source file right away. It didn't even get to you. It didn't even go out. It didn't even go on the thing. It just went away. So it takes me a little more time to have to create something, but I will create something and put the rest of them out there for you. So for everybody that's got their panties in a bunch about opinions, I suggest you keep your eyes open and everything open, because Williams brought quite a lot of information forward in terms of what's really going on in the world, bigger picture. That is what Russell wanted to bring to the table in the talk we were going to have, and that he was asking people to kind of gear up wherever they are and just be prepared for whatever comes down the pike. So for you all to remember that and have respect for someone's position, even though it may not be exactly your position, but if they're trying in the same vein, if they were in the same street with you and you needed their help, they would be willing to lend you a hand. And that speaks volumes, because I know too many people, unfortunately, that are not willing to lend a hand. And they should be, but they won't. And that's kind of really ridiculous at this juncture. So we don't have time for that anymore. It's time to kind of stand up and reach out that hand and commune at the level that you can. Try at the level that you can. So if, hey, Tony, nice to see you. So if everybody else who has the ability to file in quantum can, then do. Let that filing happen and take that step. He kind of pointed you in a place where you could do that. He's kind of giving you the reasons behind why that works or doesn't work also. And you can just take some of this information and sort through it. And if you want to take it direct and file in yourself in quantum, then do. Because we have an opportunity. And the opportunity, frankly, is numbers and neutrality, but also awareness. And so I hope that this sticks with you a little bit and you can take it in and work with it. The charade is a charade, unfortunately. And yes, we're affected by it, but maybe we can find a way to lend something really lovely to it all. Okay? So that's why I bring this to you again. And he was adding to that narrative for everyone. So yes, thank Russell and thank God and really everything around. Thank everything. You've got a lot. We are abundant here. We're abundant in light. We're abundant in energy. We're abundant in so many things that we deal with. So sharing with you is abundance. And I'm here tonight, and he was interrupting our conversation, but I don't know. Oh, she's right down here. She's here. She's all better now. So thank you, everybody, for your prayers too. But yeah, confusion and fear is the name of the game. So let's not be confused and let's not be fearful. For those that have the ability to do things on a quantum level, do it. Do it. For those that don't, maybe you will catch the wave and it'll dawn on you. And until then, we will go jolly in this interesting now space that we live in, right? And we will hold that light. And I'm going to hold that light. So I hope you'll hold it with me. All right, everybody. Have a good night. They're going to vacuum up here soon. They actually came in to clean the office, so I'm going to have to vacate. All right. Go jolly, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Lots of love.